Week 59, Book 59. After a couple of technological hiccups, um, Dickens, the Pickwick Papers, originally published in 1836 in installments and as a novel in 1837. This is his first novel. It was originally begun as text to accompany these pictures, these illustrations, but over time it became uh, a text of its own that the pictures accompanied. So the power dynamic switched completely. And part of why that happened is the guy who was drawing the pictures was a famous illustrator at the time. And 2 months in, he took his own life. And uh, Dickens continued the series with somebody else doing the illustrations. And so he had become known as Boz, B-O-Z, doing journalistic writings and things of that nature. So this was his first essay into a larger format, really. And at first, it really was episodic. He would write 35 some odd pages to be put in each installment of a newspaper, and accompanied by this picture, and then move on. And the picture, it was meant to be originally just sort of a spoof of these well-to-do, scientifically minded gentlemen, sort of a joke on them for doing these things that really weren't very scientific. And eventually it took on a life of its own. Now it stars Pickwick. That's the main character, Samuel Pickwick. And Pickwick is a gentleman in his 50s, I believe, upper 50s, and he is basically just naive and nice and doesn't really understand the world. And he has with him Winkle, who is a guy who, is supposed to be a sportsman, but he's actually just a joke of a sportsman. And Snodgrass, a guy who's a terrible poet, and Tupman, a guy who thinks of himself as a Lothario, as a Don Juan, but is really just nothing. And so these are his companions, and obviously it's meant to be a spoof and a parody. They go places and drink and get in misadventures. They go and watch an election happening. They go and watch a cricket match. So they go places and these things happen to them. And at first, there really is no real thread to it other than just these goofy guys. But early on, they encounter a con man who eventually goes by the name of Jingle, and Jingle becomes the first like recurring character. They also get connected to a group of people called the Wardles in Dingley Dell, and this leads to other complications because some of the other Pickwickians, not Pickwick. Pickwick is a confirmed bachelor, but some of the other ones begin to form attachments to some of the young women at the Wardles, and this will lead to complications later. And what happens to Jingle goes with them, and Jingle runs off with Miss Wardle, and is pursued by Pickwick, and they basically expose him for being a fraud and a con man, and she's mortified and whatnot. Anyway, what happens with that is Pickwick meets Sam Weller, who becomes his servant, and Sam Weller begins to slowly overshadow as one of the stars of the series as a working man helper who actually has some sense, who understands the world a little bit, the dirtiness, the grit, the crime, and this kind of thing. And as the series continues, as the novel continues, this becomes more and more important because what happens is Pickwick's landlady, Miss Bardell, she uses an event where she faints and is held by Pickwick. She's fallen on the ground as an excuse to basically sue him for breach of contract because she's going to claim that he proposed marriage and then backed out on her, which in this time period when a woman's big thing in life was her marriageability becomes a serious problem. And she takes this case to Dodson and Fogg, and they pursue him for, I think, £1,500 in damages, which is a fortune at the time. And Pickwick refuses. arrested for debt, and eventually winds up in the Fleet prison, where Sam goes with him. And Sam can't originally go with him. Sam arranges to go with him. And this shows Sam's deep devotion to Pickwick. And this elevates Pickwick from a bumbling fool to a bumbling fool with a heart of gold. And so we start having sympathy for the character like we didn't have before through the eyes of Sam. Along the way, by the way, the Pickwicks have a desire to hear people tell stories. So they go someplace, they drink rum next to a fire, and some old drunken sot tells them a story. One of the stories they tell is basically a proto version of A Christmas Carol. It doesn't star Ebenezer Scrooge, and it doesn't star ghosts exactly, but it's basically the same kind of idea where a guy who hates Christmas has a mystical vision and grows to love Christmas afterwards. So we can see here the prototype of a lot of different Dickens stories. Bleak House is basically an extended version of the law thing we see here, and various other aspects. We're going to see other despicable characters like Dodson and Fogg throughout. We're going to see other con men such as Jingle throughout uh, uh, Dickens' work. And this is also where Dickens starts to shift focus from parroting Pickwick to focusing on the agency of Sam Weller. And this is a very critical kind of move because, the novel has always had a liberal, sympathy focused approach from the very beginning. We go back to even to Tale of Genji. There are aspects of it there where we're getting a story told by the women. We're getting the women's story, and we're getting sympathy stories. We're getting their version of events, and we see this in the European novel in the beginnings with things like Afra Ben's Orinoco, where we get the story told from the point of view of the slaves, or Robinson Crusoe, where we get the story told from the point of view of the regular sailor stranded on the island. We see this in Gulliver's Travels, which isn't really a novel, it's really a satire, but same kind of thing. We see this in Moll Flanders, we get the story from the woman of the streets. So again and again and again, we get the story of the voiceless being voiced in a novel. Clarissa and Pamela by Richardson both do this. Clarissa more successfully. Uh, Again and again and again. And it's not usually done in a, big kick you in the head political way, but it's there nonetheless. You're reading about somebody who is different from you. You're reading about the other and what the other goes through. So Henry Fielding in Tom Jones writes about the orphan. So here we get Sam Weller, the servant, and he becomes the main focal point of the novel. He becomes the moral focus as the novel progresses. And it becomes his story as much as it is Pickwick's story. And that becomes extremely important as Dickens, who is he writing to? No, he's writing this in a popular newspaper published periodically and read by the servants in the house, in the kitchen, and the breaks. And that became his readership. And so he started to write what he knew, which was that working class life. And he was writing to the people he knew, working class people. And that becomes the focal point of Dickens's career in many ways. And we see a lot of these tendencies right here in Pickwick. Now, that said, Pickwick is a very loose novel. The first half to two-thirds really are sort of more episodic. It's not until the last half to last third that it really starts to gather a plot and gather some gravity. Excuse me. So this Pickwick Club, which went around looking at things, eventually becomes involved in these very high stakes things, this Fleet Prison thing. And what happens at Fleet Prison is it becomes completely clear that a man like Pickwick is 100% out of his ken. He doesn't know what he's doing here. And that really begins to weigh on the character. And I think in a way, on Dickens as well, who had started Oliver Twist at some point, by the way. So he was starting his more serious writing career alongside the end of Pickwick. And I think it shows inside of the way in which the end of Pickwick picks up some more serious themes of these kinds of things, but also shows that with Dickens' view of the world, he has gone beyond the scope that Pickwick can handle. So Pickwick literally gracefully bows out. He says his roamings are over. It's basically the Byron poem. So we'll go no more roving. His roaming is over, and he's going to settle down and retire. And his companions have now become his friends more than his companions. And Snodgrass and Winkle get married. Tupman remains unmarried, which is kind of the irony of him being the eternal lover, and he's not even got a woman. Pickwick, of course, remains a bachelor for life, but he is a very benevolent uh, elderly gentleman to younger women. He treats them as his nieces and his daughters, and really wants to see them set up in life. And that's what he does. He helps all of his friends get set up in life if they need to, and manages their affairs if they need him to. There's a really cute, interesting scene where Tony Weller, who is Sam Weller's father, uh, his wife passes away, and he gets his inheritance, and he puts it all in a purse and gives it to uh, um, Pickwick and says, "Take care of this for me." And this is a complete reversal of what you would normally expect. You would normally expect someone like Tony Weller to be very suspicious of the rich and powerful, just wanting to steal their money. But with Pickwick, it's the other way around. And that's the key. That's the key where I think sympathy begins to develop, because Sam, who is our voice, our way into this world, and uh, Tony Weller, his dad, both trust Pickwick. So we learn that he's a trustworthy person. He's naive and kind and rich. So, and he doesn't get punished by the world for it. Dickens keeps him protected, in part through Sam Weller, and part through other methods. But essentially, Pickwick is protected from the full predation of the predatory world. This is going to change when we get to someone like, say, Thomas Hardy, where there will be no protection for people from the predatory world. The world is just a predator. But here, in the beginnings of the switch from a sort of a more romantic version of a novel to a more realistic version of a novel, in this transition period, the full brunt of the predatory world is not there. Now, this is partially because Dickens probably had a view more similar to the world is not predatory, that there are people who are predatory, and the people who are predatory are the bad things. The system is maybe okay, but there are people who abuse the system. Whether or not the system is a problem, whether or not the people are the problem, whether or not the world itself is a problem, what if it's human nature, this is going to become something that I think you can see argued in the novel throughout, particularly the 19th century. And so we are at just the beginning of that journey. And we'll get to other Dickens soon. Not immediately, but the next one is Oliver Twist, which, like I said, he started towards the end of this one. So we'll get to that soon. And so have a good day.